Troy Hurtubise was in his early 20s when he found his life's calling. And his calling looked like a 600-pound grizzly. An old grizzly bear with a tuft of white beard, leaning up against a stump, arms folded, almost like he was waiting for Troy. Later, Troy would name the bear Old Man because of that furry white beard tuft. Troy was in the mountains near Quesnel, British Columbia, and he had just been caught by a grizzly in a clearing. Troy was carrying an aluminum sluice for gold panning, a rubber dinghy, a rifle, and a knapsack. But Troy didn't aim his rifle at the bear. Instead, he dropped his gear and drew out his knives, because if you're gonna get eaten by a grizzly, you might as well do it in style. Old Man attacked Troy, and after knocking Troy down and stomping around aggressively, the grizzly decided to spare his life. Had the bear been a female, Troy says, he would have been killed for certain. Troy was spared by the bear, but the experience would change him forever. The attack imparted into him an obsession, a supernatural drive to overcome nature, to conquer the animal world, or at least show he wasn't afraid. Troy would, over the course of his life, build several suits of grizzly-proof armor, using his skills as a scrapper and an amateur inventor. That same man who was made to feel small and weak by a grizzly would later tempt fate by trying to creep up on bears in the dump in Mattawa, hoping to get attacked, trying to track them through the garbage, sniffing, prowling, like a scout on the trail, doing what Troy called close-quarter bear research. That's right. Today we're talking about Troy Hurtubise, the star of the documentary Project Grizzly, the man who lived and died tilting his lance at big furry windmills, because we can't have an episode about creative obsession without a true obsessive like Troy. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no duh on the internet and get to the juicy facts.
When someone is driven creatively to do things, we call it passion. But that's the hitch. You have to do great for it to be recognized as passion. Because if you're just banging scrap metal together to fight bears in a junkyard for no money and no glory, then we have another word for it: obsession. So today we're celebrating obsession. We're exploring it. We're looking at how healthy creative obsession is, how productive it can be, and how we can harness it to do greater things. And we have a few myths to dispel while we're at it. Myths about obsession. Myths like: Myth 1. Obsession is never healthy. Obsession without a clear business model is just another word for addiction. Myth 2. Where does obsession come from in the brain? Where does passion come from? And what link do they both share with creativity? Myth 3. Obsession, passion, creativity. None of it matters if it's not sustainable, if it doesn't make money. And how would I know if my passion is potentially lucrative? Those are the myths for today. But first we're going to look at how Troy built his first suit of honor and what it cost him. Let's start from the beginning. And the beginning for Troy is with his dad.
Okay.
Now, his Joe was a tinkerer, inventor himself. He was an old school MacGyver.
Okay.
So he showed his son how to create things and make things work. So I think that was a big part of this, how it all started. He's got a lot of attention, and that was his mentor, and he got love from his dad by building things.
That makes a difference if, like, your method of impressing Papa is taking a paperclip and gum and making a bomb like MacGyver.
It's pretty cool, Dad, right? He said inventing things makes him truly happy. Yeah, this is Troy himself. He says it seems less like a normal hobby than a drug. It's addictive with diminishing returns. So as a grown up, he made a modest living in the dump business. So not having a lot of funds, he used supplies from work, from the dump, garbage pretty much.
Okay. So
most of his stuff was junk. He had an imagination, a squirrel cage brain that would not turn off. Do you know anybody like that, Joe?
I know a few people like that. A few of them are in this room.
I was going to say, I'm looking at one right now.
Right.
He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a very educated man, but he could see things other people couldn't. He had an engineer mind and a creative mind.
And a ton of duct tape and a junkyard at his disposal.
I wonder what this man could have done if he had like a real lab, a real education, or like some kind of backing from a major manufacturers. I think this man could have made some inventions to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want a cycle like that in their staff that would work 5-6 days in a row without any sleep?
Right. Also, wouldn't it be weird to be in the office with a dude who is making armor for bears?
Hey, Troy, you got to do that after work. We got to make things that are actually saleable.
Everybody else is trying to make a better non-stick pan, and you got one guy over there just like, no, I'm going to wear this.
Yeah, how many of those could you possibly sell in a year?
Right.
Okay, so he would work for 50 straight hours. Bathing, eating, those would be optional things.
Wow.
So true creative obsession.
So you probably smelled some funk inside that armor.
No time for healthy, normal relationships. A lot of family stress, because not only was he not there presently, he's obsessing, banging around things out in his garage, out in his shop. He's not present, but every cent that he earns goes towards his next invention.
Okay. Can I ask you a question about this? So his father would build stuff with him. That's kind of how they like bonded. If Troy had this obsession where he's like can't stop doing this, why wouldn't he get his like kids involved? Like that seems like that's what his father did. So if you're obsessed with something,
that's a good point, right?
I know we're kind of jumping the gun a bit on like how to be obsessed in a healthy way, but drag the kids out there. Why wouldn't they be like, yeah, bear armor? That's a kid's activity.
Well, what I heard about the kids was their take on Dad, and they were very honest in a lot of different interviews I read, was he was just a very difficult man.
Okay.
He was very stubborn. He was very strong-willed.
So maybe not somebody you want to be hanging out with in their shop when they're busy.
Yeah, he's yelling at you, throwing things at you.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, we got to give this guy credit, because his first bear suit, bear protective armor, was, like you were describing, junkyard dog, dollar store, duct tape.
Right.
But as he labored, and he made adjustments, and he made upgrades, he researched, he invested, it started to look something more like NASA would have, something that maybe Iron Man would wear.
Right. So do you mind if I start by sort of outing us?
Please.
We can't
I'll tell him everything.
Oh, God. We can't really have an episode about obsession without talking about our own obsessions, I don't think. So, Todd, you had a phrase once. You said that the goal is to aim your obsession like a pistol. What do you mean exactly by that?
We all have different obsessions, and some of them can be very destructive. You know, the addictions, alcohol or sex addictions or anger stuff, and workaholics. But if we can aim it in something creative, productive, sustainable,
yeah,
and just kind of, because we only can't chase after two rabbits. You have to chase after what?
Yeah.
So if you can turn it and paint all that stuff you do for bad for good, you're going to do great things.
Isn't that like, I think it's a Zen phrase. It's man who chases after two rabbits will catch neither. But I like that you mentioned that you can only do one thing at a time. Because I think when we talk obsession, people are like, oh, you can take up jogging, or you can do other things with your obsession. And Troy is our example of, no, you can't. If you are really obsessed, your time goes to one thing. So
you can't love two people at the same time, not truly love them. You can dabble in things, but you can't be into it.
Exactly. Is there anything in your life where you've gone all in like that?
Absolutely. Athletically, I did that.
Okay.
Where work didn't matter, friends didn't matter, love didn't matter. All that mattered was training.
Okay. And for that period of obsession, how did you feel?
On fire.
On fire.
Yeah. That's all that mattered. I didn't think about anything. I dreamed about it at night. It was a 24-hour thing. What about you?
I have had periods of obsession, and it's usually in writing. You saying you're on fire, it totally feels that way. Like when you've got like a short story or a really good contest entry, it's all you think about.
Do you feel like you have your compass, like nobody else around can see it, but this is more important than anything else? Yes,
in that moment, in moments of obsession, it totally feels like, you know, nobody else can see that you're on the rails, that there's no pulling you off. So we're going to ask the question, because we've both experienced obsession, can it be healthy? In your experiences, when you got obsessed, did it feel healthy? Did it feel like it was something that was good for you? Or did people try to pull you aside and say, hey, you're obsessing?
People close to me, the people that knew me, would say that I was overdoing it.
Okay. I get the same. Like if I go into an obsessive mode for a story, usually family or friends will pull me aside and say, okay, eat something and think about sleeping, please.
They can see it on you. You're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah, they do. So we're going to ask, can obsession be healthy? How do we aim it like a pistol in the way Todd has been talking about? First, we're going to quote Psychology Today. Obsession. Clinical psychologists think of them as fixations with an object, person, or activity, and they are abnormal because they impair our capacity to love and work. So impairing our capacity to love and work is the bit we're going to focus on. When we talk about obsession, like Troy, our grizzly man, his cost him relationships and money. So we're going to basically, spoiler to everybody, your obsession is unhealthy if it has consequences. Basically, it's the same as any addiction. Like it's defined by its consequences.
If you're neglecting yourself, which could be your finances, your physical health, not taking care of your kids, your spouse.
Right, exactly.
Not working, going to work and doing your side job and not your regular job. I've known a guy like that did that one time.
Yeah. It becomes evident to other people around you when the consequences start mounting. But yeah, work and relationships are usually where those come from. But with obsession, when you got obsessed, what would you neglect? What would be the consequences?
Well, I'll tell you what I used to do. I had a job where I was in outside sales. And what I would do is I would just go do my obsession.
Right.
I'd clock in and I'd go do my thing, and work was an afterthought. I'd catch up with that when on my time, not their time. But I don't regret it, man. I don't regret it a bit.
Yeah. I think that the regretting component, maybe there is something to that some consequences may be expressed with regret. But I'm betting Troy never regretted it. I mean, later in life, he regrets not making it in the history I was reading. But I wonder how many people who are truly obsessed ever regret what they were doing.
No, they don't have any shame or
yeah,
I think they think that what they're doing is so important that they'll pay everybody back later.
Perfect.
And they're going to rise above it all.
Yeah, I think all this questioning, I feel like I've been like investigating you, but really that's the answer we're looking for is, one, when you're obsessed, it feels like it's going to pay off later. That what Todd said, it feels like you're going to rise above
everything. It's a higher calling.
Yes. And two, when you start getting those consequences and you can identify them, that's when you know obsession is unhealthy. So if you ever ask yourself, is my obsession with soap carving, is an example used in another episode, if your obsession starts incurring consequences, if you are paying people, like literally pawning things, or if your relationships are starting to get rocky, or people are pulling you aside and saying, please get some sleep, that's when you start getting into unhealthy obsession.
You're donating your blood plasma, and everyone down there knows your name.
Yes, exactly. Then that means it might be time to hang up the bear armor. So somebody can be obsessed with like gardening or Facebook or going to the gym, but it doesn't necessarily mean obsession. It just means that they're paying more attention to this thing as an interest or an activity. And
or as a comfort time burglar.
Exactly.
Which is not what we're talking about.
Yeah, we are, and also we're not talking about obsessive compulsiveness, so like washing your hands over and over. We're talking about creative obsession, not the other types of obsession. So Todd also pointed out when we were preparing this episode that we want to point out obsession with people is a different topic. And that's oftentimes, we had a romantic obsession episode. Turns out that kind of obsession can lead to unhealthy places. But for this episode, we're strictly speaking about creative obsession.
And that falls into when we're too interested in our brothers or sisters or our kids' relationships. We're just obsessive about a romantic interest.
Yeah. And you can also be obsessed with other people's romantic interests. You can be obsessed with...
She could do better than them. They should get a divorce. And,
yeah. You could be obsessed with drama. So no, we're talking very, very narrowly about obsession with an activity or obsession with creating something. According to the same Psychology Today article, the components of a healthy obsession. So we're going to discuss what makes a healthy obsession. We've already said that consequences make an unhealthy obsession. So, Todd, I'd like you to think back on your athletic days when you were doing all that training, and I will share if I hit these as well in my writing. So here are the key components to healthy obsession. First is openness to experience, and that's basically means openness to change. So while you were obsessing, would you have been open to change? Like if somebody took you aside and said, could you run at a different time of day, or could you adjust?
Not only that, I was seeking it. I was going to different boxing gyms. I was trying different kinds of food. I was reaching out to people for mentors. So yes. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the key components to getting better as a short writer is feedback. You have to be available for that. I think maybe the only time this isn't a component is if I don't want to change the time of day that I'm writing. That could be a problem. The next component to a healthy obsession is emotional stability. Now, this is necessary to sort of see obsession to the end. If you're less emotionally stable, that's where you get like obsessive artists who constantly doubt and change their plans. So the emotional stability is necessary to basically see it all the way through and not give up halfway. This is going to be a silly question before I even ask it, but do you consider yourself emotionally stable enough to see an obsession to the end, to complete something?
That would be a weak one. No, not always.
Okay.
And not to the real end. Maybe a premature end.
Okay.
What about you?
I have a problem with my head where I can't not complete it.
Okay.
Even if I have an awful story, I mean, even an awful episode that I'm working on, if it's really bad, I will still finish it in outline at the very least, to see what it would look like.
Almost stubborn.
Yeah, stubborn. That's a good way to put it. So this article says
better than
emotional
people
stability.
that are so good at starting things, which a lot of people are.
Yeah.
More people are good at starting multiple things than finishing multiple things.
Right. So that one, that one, it seems like obsessives may need to work on a bit more to get that healthy element in there. And the last one is agreeableness. which is something that helps you take feedback from others while they are trying to appreciate or react to your obsession. Now, Todd, do you think of yourself as being agreeable when you are in an obsessed mode?
I hate to say this, but it depends.
Really?
I consider the source a lot. There's people that, like you being one that I respect and listen to, but some people, no.
Okay.
I'm just stubborn, and whatever they have to say there's no value to me. And I know it's not true because it does have value, but I just get kind of stubborn.
It seems, just strictly speaking about our past obsessions, we may have had unhealthy obsessions, Todd. If we're not hitting those three components of a healthy obsession, openness to experience, emotional stability, and agreeableness, if you're missing one of those, it may have been a slightly unhealthy obsession. So, can we make ourselves feel better by hearing a little bit more about Troy's obsession?
Oh, let me tell you about Troy. Now, I want to point a picture of Troy. Troy's a tough Canadian guy, whipped, thin, muscular, teetering, working, gluing, setting things on fire in his shop, chain smoking cigarettes. You know the guy I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He's wound tight.
It sounds like it. That's a guy that survives on coffee and nicotine.
Now, his testing way to test his suits was absolutely bizarre. So he would go out and bring the biggest, baddest bikers from up in British Columbia, which I'm guessing is the Hells Angels. They're pretty big up in that area.
Okay.
And you guys got to watch his YouTube. It's great. He'll take trucks and get ran over by trucks. He's getting thrown off cliffs by these guys. These guys are actually like popping a Miller Lite and then taking a 2x4 and smashing them upside the head as hard as they can.
Wow.
Throwing them off cliffs. Anything you can imagine. Setting them on fire. He had one test where he got shot with rubber bullets, and then he got shot with a real bullet that it caught that didn't get through his suit.
Dang. So he's not satisfied putting a crash test dummy in his suit. He is just...
No, he wants to do that part. That's funny. He couldn't get anyone else to do it. Like his kid. His kid would have been a good one for this.
Right.
Son, come here. Let me show you how we do things.
Jeez.
Now, the videos are very crude, but it's very hard to look away.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you watched a bunch of these.
I watched a bunch of them, yeah. The van one where he goes literally flying when that van hits him.
Yeah, he was on Ripley's Believe It or Not, the one Joe's talking about, and they build all the tension up of he's in front of this brick wall, and they lift this big, heavy truck, and they smash him.
Through the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone cheers. I think he just loved the attention a little bit, too. A little bit of attention whore, our boy Troy.
I totally believe that, yes.
Now, he did all these videos. He made all these YouTube videos, and he made them over and over to try to sell his ideas to make this sustainable, to get some monetary thing out of this. He didn't make any money off that, but what he did do was get some attention from a major documentary filmmaker, and they wanted to make a movie about him.
Okay, so do you mind if we sort of leave that as a tease so we can talk about the documentary? Excellent. So before we get to that, we want to talk passion. Specifically when obsession basically becomes a passion, when it becomes something we don't look down on. Because there is a tipping point. And we'll go back to our own experiences for this. I was listening to a lecture by a writer named Brandon Sanderson. And he's a big fantasy writer. He wrote the Mistborn series. And he says something about writing that struck me, and it reminded me of our obsession episode that we were working on. He said that in his Brigham Young University lecture, he says, when you are playing basketball, just like a pickup game, and it's like at the YMCA or out at the lot, he says, nobody stops at the end of the game, turns to you and says, okay, now when are you going to try out for the NBA? But writing, when you are writing, people ask you that even if you are at the lowest level. They will say, when are you going to try to go pro?
Where's your book deal?
Right. So we put a real emphasis on people taking their obsession and making it professional. We want to see somebody trying. Like, we really want to see somebody's obsession become their passion and become something lucrative. So that's kind of what we're exploring today. So to get to that point, to get to a rewarding passion, you kind of have to first develop a little bit of flow state. Have you ever heard of that term?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. You're not thinking about every little thing; it's just flowing.
Right. When you are training and you get into the zone, quote unquote, what does that feel like to you? What does it mean to you getting into a flow state?
Where I've got enough reps in where I'm not thinking about the next thing I'm going to do. I'm just thinking about the goal, the win.
Right. It's not the same thing, but it's almost like the runner's high of creativity.
Absolutely.
I'm sure our man Troy got into this. Like it's when you lock into what you're doing, and it feels like time is flying, and everything you're doing is magic. Like it's just everything is popping and coming together.
And you just think it's so cool that you don't understand that everyone else doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to be part of it.
Right. That definitely happens with training. It happens in writing. It happens in almost any creative activity, sculpting, whatever you're into, whatever your obsession is. I guarantee there is an element of getting locked in and getting that flow on where just things happen naturally and everything is coming together.
An obsession is something that I respect in people. I look for friends who have an obsession of some kind. People in my life are a little crazy about something, and that's why I love them.
Yeah, there's always the instinct to make fun of somebody for their obsession, but without it, I mean, like you kind of need it to be an interesting, motivated person, I believe.
Yeah, you're vanilla, you're dull.
Yeah, so celebrate your obsessions, and wherever possible, turn it into a passion. Do you want to discuss where that flow state comes from, where that reward comes from? Awesome. So there's something called it's a section of the brain called the ventral striatum. And it's made up of the nucleus accumbens and the olfactory tubercle, which don't ask me what those things mean. I just know that it sits next to the amygdala. So it's like this, it's in the core or the middle of your brain, basically. And when it's active, it lights up, according to the Journal of Neuroscience, it lights up and activates in proportion to how motivated a person feels. So the higher your motivation is, say if you're highly motivated to make bear armor, the more activity that area of the brain has. So when we talk about flow state and the euphoria of doing a passion or an obsession, it's something that hasn't been studied very much in modern psychology, but it's very real. Like it's not... When we talk about flow and passion, it's not something where it's like, it's just emotional, or it's just strictly, it's made up or in your head. It's very real, and there's a reward center in your brain built for this. Now, according to Northwestern University and University of London, they interviewed people who had a lot of creative passion, or they were self-proclaimed obsessives. And they wanted to find out if there's something different with the way they tick. And just completely anecdotally, this doesn't strictly apply to our bear hunter here, but they found out by surveying 500 people and evaluating them on creativity, on their personality scores, the people who sustained higher passions and obsessions in life, they also had greater romantic passion. They found out that the people who were kind of obsessive, after they followed them for 9 months and performed physical intimacy, or asked them about physical intimacy, and gave them tasks to do while they were being studied, they found out that they were the creative people sustained passion longer, and they also were able to overlook like imperfections with the relationship or with each other. Basically, they had what obsessive have, which is positive illusions. So that leads me to my next question.
That could serve you well, right, in life?
That's exactly what I was thinking. When I was reading this, I thought about you briefly. I thought, I wonder how many flaws in a plan or how many flaws in people Todd has overlooked because he's deep into an obsession.
And I think when you see somebody and that they have a skill set, I'm a big fan of running with what you're good at, and kind of ignoring your weaknesses, because I don't think we can really eliminate our weaknesses. So,
right, the hallmark of a good obsession or a good passion is you're willing to do it even though you know there's flaws. I
guess the term "run with it" is probably showing.
Oh, there we go.
You leave the other stuff behind, you know.
That we found that, yeah, run with it. That's perfect. That is exactly how obsession should be approached. And when I was reading this, when it was talking about how we can overlook flaws and replace them with positive illusions, I could not help but think of Troy and his bear armor. So speaking of our bear man, how did his documentary go?
So Troy got his documentary called Project Grizzly, and it was a big hit. It was an instant cult classic. Now, he was a crowd favorite at the 1996 Toronto International Film Festival, and he was hanging around with Val Kilmer, man. Big Hollywood stars. Quentin Tarantino, the director, one of our favorites, he was a huge fan. I think another obsessive guy. You can see Quentin Tarantino obsessing all night, watching movies. And
after watching Val Kilmer do the Doors, those are both guys who easily. They saw a kindred spirit in bear armor. Like the level of obsession they go through for their art. I can see that.
Both of them built the same cloth as Troy.
Right, exactly.
Troy did not like the documentary. It made him. He sees himself, and I see him as a serious inventor.
Okay.
Maybe a little misguided in what he's working on for end product, but he kind of thought it made him look foolish, and he didn't appreciate that.
Okay, so it didn't paint him in as good of a light as he wanted.
Yeah, it made him look like a whack job out in the woods getting hit upside, which is what he was.
Right, yeah.
But what he was actually creating has some value and some things. But he wasn't just Canada famous. He wasn't just a cult guy. He was American famous too. He got all this press. He was on some big talk shows. He was on Roseanne Barr's show. Penn and Teller wanted him on. David Letterman's people reached out to him because he wanted to drive his limo over there and run him over in the bear suit.
Right.
But Troy told him to pound sand. He said he wasn't interested.
He was big enough to reject Letterman.
But this one's going to blow your socks off. He was also on a parody of one of your favorite shows you talk about all the time, The Simpsons.
Excellent. That's the mark of fame for me. Once you're on The Simpsons, you made it.
He talks about The Simpsons a lot.
I do, yeah.
He did write a book. He got tons of press. To me, he reminded me of Evel Knievel.
Okay.
A showman who's willing to put his life on his line and roll the cameras in life or death, you know.
To entertain the rest of us.
Exactly. So we watch it just to kind of half hope he gets killed, right?
Right. Yeah, those videos, for anyone who's listening, we already talked about it, but it bears repeating. Those YouTube videos of him getting hit by stuff is amazing.
So he gets his 5 minutes of fame. Like I said, he wrote a book. The book didn't sell. He couldn't really turn any of his adventures into a business.
Okay.
So it just really didn't go anywhere. So he got all this press. He got all this momentum. Momentum's everything. You got to keep running. But it didn't go anywhere for him.
Okay. So not a lot of people out there looking to rent a bear suit for the day.
Now, me being obsessive compulsive, and Joe and I have both been creatively obsessive about this podcast at times in different things. Would you agree with that?
I would say that's fair, yes.
Creating a studio and all kinds of different things. How we do our advertising, how we do our writing, how we practice. So when I get out daydream, being my obsessive self, my wife always says this to me. She smiles at me, smiles at me and says, "That's great. Everything you work on is great. But until that happens, until that day comes, why don't you just go off to work?"
I think that brings us very nicely to our third discussion, which is when can we quit our day job? When does our passion finally tip into usefulness and value? So how do we harness obsession and make it lucrative? There are so many articles about this online. I was inundated, but a lot of them were actually pretty useful. They talk. I mean, I think one of the biggest trends in TED Talks and business is encouraging people to take their passions and turn them into jobs, to turn them into money.
What's the cliche? If you do something you love for work, you never work another day in your life.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one we hear all the time. So we're going to go to Forbes because I found a Forbes article that was really good for this. And we'll have the link in our show notes too. But the title of it is The Real Secret to Making Money by Following Your Passions. So very simply put, they put up a really simple equation. It's passion plus usefulness equals value. And so I'm going to ask you probably a simple question about our grizzly fighter. Do you think his bear armor was useful to anyone but Troy?
No.
No?
No, maybe a hunter but I think a gun would be more effective. It's good planning.
I imagine a Canadian family getting like when you get suited up for the snow.
Oh, you put your bear suit on before you go to school?
Everyone puts on their bear armor and goes to school like they're astronauts or space marines or something.
We apologize to everybody in Anchorage and stuff that we think you guys are total Eskimos. And
in my brain, everybody is wearing bear armor up there.
That you fight a bear daily and you're get a cup of coffee, fight a bear. That's just
right.
another Tuesday morning.
I assume that's Russia, actually. But it really sounds to me like Troy was suffering by not having one component of this, and I think that's the useful part. So whatever your passion is, again, I do apologize to any soap carvers out there because I keep using them as an example of tough things to turn into a lucrative passion. But whatever you do, whatever you are obsessive about, if you could find a way to turn it to something useful for others.
Something that serves, something of service. But use that craziness, just point the gun in another direction.
Yes. And you can do that with a lot of different obsessions and passions. Just a little minor tweak can make it into something lucrative.
We talked about this in our master when we were talking about how you master something. Now you put all that time in, and maybe it's a sports and you're not doing that anymore. But if you use that same discipline structure and point towards another goal, it transfers.
Right.
You're not starting over like everybody else because you've already got that good discipline habits in place.
Yes, and obsession certainly bakes in those habits. I know that we're currently podcasting from a post-COVID-19 world where the coronavirus has just sort of kicked our butts economically. I think America's businesses, like 30% of them have just disappeared throughout the last year. So we're not necessarily encouraging you to go out and take risks for your obsession to just immediately start a business model in a tough business world. We're encouraging you more to try lots of different useful obsessions. Just strictly speaking from my own experience, I remember somebody pulled me aside when I was writing, and they were saying, I was writing for games, like Game Store, like Dungeons & Dragons, that kind of stuff. I was writing game modules, and somebody pulled me aside, and they're like, you're actually writing stories?
Well, yeah, and I know this story, too. You had said that you quit writing.
I did.
You had said, you know what? I gave you my heart, and you've betrayed me, so I'm not going to write ever again.
Yes. I had about a year where I didn't think that I was writing at a high enough caliber to try it professionally. And I wrote games. And I put as much into those as I would have for a contest-worthy short story. And a friend of mine pulled me aside and they said, you just need to go back to looking at how to make this useful to others. And that's what we're encouraging people. If you have an obsession, if you have a passion, and this article basically says the same thing, find a way to make that passion or skill useful, and find a way to make it to put it into something that is aimed and pointed and has a direction. I'm going to quote real quick, just Business Insider. They recommend if you have a passion or an obsession and you don't know how to do that, you've gone to the drawing board. You've brainstormed with your friends and family. How do I make this passion or obsession into a business model, or how do I aim it into something that is useful to other people? Business Insider has good advice for this. They say first seek out and try to get consulted by somebody who does this too. So if you are a soap carver enthusiast, find the professionals, figure out how they made it into a worthy business model. They also recommend not just looking for, but also creating videos, seminars, podcasts, and guides. So really what it seems to be encouraging to me is join the community. Once you have found professionals that do what you do, consult with them, and then just start jumping into the community and see what happens. See where your passion leads you, and see what other people who have made it lucrative, who have made it professionally, see what they do.
And being creative, whatever your creation is healthy. It's good for you.
Right. That's to bring it back to Troy. That really makes me think. Maybe he didn't think about that usefulness. He doesn't really seem to have, for as much as he studied and built his armor, it really doesn't seem to me like he sought out professionals who had been building armor for.
Well, there's a common theme through this whole research, and this is from anyone who worked with him, including the director on the documentary, all of his co-workers, his wife, kids, all said the same thing. He was incredibly stubborn and prideful.
Okay.
Hurtubise himself called himself, towards the end, the biggest failure you have ever looked at.
Wow.
And I'm going to quote him here. Every single one of my innovations, every single of my writings, I gave it my best shot. I fell. I stood up. I said, fuck you, let's go again. And he said this just a few months before. And he said, not even to this day, not one of his inventions has come to market to be a saleable project.
Wow.
He was just too proud, Joe, too stubborn to work a normal job. He really thought he was above it. So not having food to eat, he had to go bankruptcy. He had to sell his most prized invention, his 5 minutes of fame, his bear suit. He had to sell that for cash, like pawn it for practically nothing.
Oh, it's so much more. If you had told me he sold it purposefully at an auction or something, that at least wouldn't have hit me in the gut like that did.
Yeah, just sold it to some guy.
Yeah, pawning it.
Yeah. Now the biggest thing, and probably the biggest pain in his life, was when he had to give up his rented garage workshop.
Okay.
He got foreclosed on. He was so behind on rent, he had to give away all the equipment he had inside. And that just destroyed him as a man.
Yeah, when you're getting rid of your tools, that's when it's pretty much over.
So, as you're kind of seeing where we're headed here, 56-year-old Troy collided his truck with a large transport truck, and he died. It's suspected by all the authorities that it was a suicide.
Okay.
So he didn't, take some pills and go to bed. He crashed his truck into a truck going the other way, a violent, fast death.
It is extremely sad and tragic as an end. Is it weird, though, that I almost feel like it's slightly fitting? I mean, the only more fitting death for him might have been getting mauled by a bear.
Yeah.
But I don't imagine a guy who wears grizzly armor going quietly into the night.
Yeah, right. His wife was real sweet. She said this in the interview. She said she hopes he's not suffering anymore and that he finds the peace that he couldn't find in life. He just kind of lived for himself. She saw him as a very selfish man. Now, something he said, that this really resonated with me, kind of like a little motivational thing. He said, if you have perseverance, imagination, and research, you can do amazing things. And I like that.
I like that, too. There was a Slate article that talked about this guy, and I love their title. It was something to the effect of, we should all live like this guy lived. That if you have an obsession and you really see it through, then it's not wasted.
I respect anyone that's willing to work that hard. Discipline and hard work is something that I hold above all other things, above education. Just someone who's willing to dress up and show up every day.
Absolutely.
Anytime you create something, Joe, and you can back me up on this, you open yourself up to a lot of criticism.
Yes. Especially if it looks like bear armor.
And so you have to be tough. We talked about with your writing and stuff. I mean, how often do you get rejected in the writing business?
To put it nicely, you're not writing if you're not getting rejected.
I believe in life. To get anything above and beyond average, you have to get a little crazy. You have to get a little obsessed. Now, on our previous... one of our favorite episodes about Abe Lincoln, he was described by his closest friends to study so hard and long when he was in college that they were afraid he was going to go mad. So his friends would take time, like your friends would do, and come up to him and stop Abe Lincoln from studying because they're afraid his brain was going to break. That's how obsessed he was.
We've already said it. I respect the heck out of somebody who is that level of obsessed.
Now, in my sales career, I used to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and I thought people, Joe, who were taking days off, taking weekends off, were idiots, were foolish. I'm like, why would you take days off when you could be at work making money?
Right.
I no longer think that way at all, but...
Okay.
And I think medical students... getting through exams, getting through classes, and the residency program to become physicians, they have to get obsessed to get through all that testing.
Yeah, that's something we didn't really talk about. There are obsessions that are you put yourself through because you have a goal, not just creatively.
The NBA, the best athletes in the world, after every practice, after every game, will still shoot in an open gym by themselves with the lights turned off, 500 shots when no one's watching.
Yeah.
And I'm going to finish with this. I know a very talented, award-winning fantasy writer. So instead of sleeping, writes all night for nights at a time.
Don't make too much fun. I do that because nobody else is awake to interrupt me.
We're talking about my favorite obsessive, my partner here, Joe Anthony.
So, I know we usually leave it. We leave the end of our show every night to do a call to action. We love leaving people with a little bit of hope and a little bit of happiness. But for our creative obsession episode, I really wanted to share a quote from Charles Bukowski. He's a German-American poet and a short story writer, and he's got a quote about obsession that I absolutely adore. If you wouldn't mind humoring me, Todd.
If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, and maybe even your mind. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision. It could mean mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance and how much you really want it. And you'll do it despite rejection and the worst odds. And it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There is no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you for entertaining this podcast obsession with me. It's been a good ride.
It's been fun being obsessed with somebody else. You're a good partner, Joe.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. There you'll find research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debate.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.
So, speaking of opinions, do you want to read out one of our 5-star reviews?
iTunes 5-star review.
This one is by Kyla Allen. Kyla says, very helpful and informative. 2 dynamic voices helping you navigate through some of the more difficult mindsets in life. Highly appreciate this podcast and the self-help it offers. Almost like therapy.
Thanks, Kyle. That's very cool.
That's awesome.
We love you.
Thank you, everybody who has left us a review, and we will eventually read all of them, so keep putting them in.